What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Daily Dime. Coming off a very fun, very successful NFL weekend. We saw a bunch of winners in the Discord and some pick six winners, too. It wasn't just on DraftKings. I saw one of our subscribers hit for over $19,000 on pick six. So if you're not on there yet, spoiler alert, they're actually raising the floor of their payouts. So NFL is about to get even more fun, and NBA just kind of keeps chugging along with pick six. It's not going to be as effective because you didn't have as many times in NBA when you'd get 6 for 6, but like so did so many other people, and so your payout dropped to 10x or something like that. So this it's a very meaningful change for NFL. It's going to make NFL Sundays that much more fun because now we can just stack away and hopefully hit big a lot. Zach, how was your NFL weekend?
My NFL weekend was all right. No $19,000 hits over here, but congrats to all the winners. I think I lost like 5 or 10% of my entries yesterday, but I was one of those fools that was suckered into Coker there for the Panthers. So that did not help my lineups there over on DraftKings. I think I just kind of bubbled on the wrong side over there on FanDuel too. I just ran one lineup, but I do have a couple big season-long matchups that are kind of still in the balance for tonight. So I'm looking forward to the Monday night game, right? Chiefs and Bucks. I know you've got a couple picks from that game, and like you mentioned over the last couple of weeks, we've been having a lot of fun, having some success on these Monday and Thursday streams where we can kind of mix and match our NFL picks with some NBA picks. And no NBA tomorrow, part of their election day get out the vote initiative, which means all 30 teams in action here tonight. So we'll obviously talk some DFS to wrap up the stream, but plenty of options, pick six, underdog, prize picks for our props here tonight. This is the type of slate, Alex, where I think we have some picks that were dialed in on here this morning, but because the slate is so large, we're going to have more picks put into that Pick'em Games channel of the FTN Fantasy Discord throughout the day. So stay tuned, man. It's going to be a busy one.
Yeah, I mean, there are two reasons why that's true, I think. Number one, it's because there's so many damn games. Like, it's only noon. We haven't been able to sit and go through everything the way we'd like to. But also, it's because we just spent like the whole damn morning running the projections, getting a first run in. So there's still some stuff in the projections that honestly we would like to clean up, and we will throughout the afternoon. I'm hoping one of them actually gets run. Like, I already made the changes for, and I'm hoping it gets run as we are live here so we can talk it through. But one other thing I want to point out, Underdog is a very cool new like NBA type game where you get rid of all the props except for points and you get rid of lines. Everyone is just 20 plus, and all we have to do is then pick which guys are going to score 20 or more. And each player has a different multiplier, and they have a 20% profit boost on that right now. So we'll try to build a 3-pick play from that here on the show. But before we do that, let's just find a traditional 3-pick play that we love, maybe even more. We might have more than that, but I'll let you kick us off here. We've got 15 NBA games, so I'm guessing you're going to start us off in the NBA.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of those projections, some of the rates that we still want to dial in. Like, I know some of the NBA diehards will see the projection on a guy like Nemiush Keita this morning, or Persqueezius McStuffins, as we call him here in the FTN NBA chat. That's one of the guys that I think his rates are going to come down. Another guy whose rates are probably going to come down here is Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson right now is sitting at the top of the prize picks pick'em tool here at FTN Fantasy. And of course, you can use that tool for underdog. You can use that tool. Well, I wouldn't say pick six because we have the pick six tool as well. But Klay on that first run was projected for around 20 points here tonight. And the line's at 14.5. So you see that jumping off the page. You're like, okay, that's a lock. Again, I think that projection is a little bit hot. But even when we get this rerun, and I think that will actually show up here during the stream, I'm going to like an over or a more than or a higher selection, depending on where you're playing on Klay, and that line of 14.5 points here tonight. One of the best fantasy environments here on this 15-game slate. Pacers coming to town there. Mavericks 5-point home favorites, 237 implied total. And right, this is just kind of a volume and environment play. Klay has not shot well the last 3 games, and he's been under this number in all 3 after starting out the season well over this number in his first 3. So again, the volume is still there, 13 or more shot attempts in 4 of his 6 games. Just 7 attempts, all from 3 against that Minnesota team. Again, different environment, different type of defense. While I still do respect the Pacers defense, this one is going to get up and down. We know about Klay and the more open shots that he sees in his role here with Dallas. So I'm going to play into that implied total, the Mavs being 5-point, solid home favorites here, and Klay getting up another, probably 9 or 10 threes here. I like the over on 14.5 points. And it looks like 13.5, 0.94x there on underdog. I still like that, even though it's taken your multiplier down slightly.
Yeah, I'm almost tempted to switch the 19.5 points plus rebounds plus assists here, but I think I'm good just sticking with the 13.5. It's only 0.94x, right? It's not like we're dropping down to 0.8 or something like that. I also think mentioning that kind of scoring game, Klay Thompson's multiplier for the 20 plus is 2.0x. I love that because so much of what you said, I completely agree with, and I think it almost makes sense to go to like an alternate line more than just regular line, because remember those first 3 games when he shot 6 for 10, 5 of 12, 4 for 11. The shooting has obviously not been as good the last 3 games, 2 of 7, 2 of 9, 1 of 5, but that's showing us a clear pattern. When he's hot, he's going to continue to get the shots up. And one thing that's always true with shooters is like, you can say, oh, when he's hot, he's going to want to shoot more. But defenses are also going to say, all right, this guy is not him. We got to make sure he's not the one shooting. But when you're playing alongside of Kyrie and Luka Doncic, teams can't just say, all right, we got to make sure that Klay isn't shooting, because they have to do everything possible to slow down Kyrie and Luka in the first place. So we've already kind of seen it. Like, Klay is going to have these really big scoring nights. And just because he hasn't gone over 20 since the first game of the season doesn't mean that he's not going to hit this quite a few times this season. So I really like that 2.0x multiplier. And as you said, like, the matchup is just so good in this pace here, and I think he's going to get the shots tonight. It's just a matter of if they fall. And if they fall, I almost feel like the difference between 13.5 and 14.5 and even all the way up to 19.5 is just so much smaller for him than it is for basically any other player.
Yeah, and like you mentioned that 2x multiplier on the new like pick and roll game mode that they have there, like that can give you a little bit of wiggle room to maybe squeeze in some of those higher projected players like a Trae Young, who's going to get you down like a 0.65x or something in that type of competition. Like, adding in the Klay 2x there is something that you can kind of maybe pair one of those, lower multipliers and get your boost up. Like, we noticed that if you, like, I think the default in that mode, right, for a 3 pick is 7x actually. So like, that's something that, again, I think they have 112 player props, points props up for that game mode here tonight. So something that I need to, as you mentioned before we started recording, you can swipe through this game mode like Tinder. So it's been a while since I was, in my swiping days, Alex. So I'm excited to kind of dive into that later on this afternoon. And I did see AJ in the chat say, I don't know if I gave him the okie doke there, thinking we were going to start with a Nemiush Keita prop, but says starting the day off with the deep pulls with McStuffins. Yeah, anytime I can bring up Persqueezius, I do so.
Absolutely. All right, as you can see on the screen already, I'm taking us to the NFL side here tonight for my first pick of the night. Samaje Perine higher than 7.5 receiving yards. He has gone over 20 in 3 consecutive games, but it's worth noting that he hasn't been targeted a ton. It's 2 targets, 1 target, 2 target, and it's just he's been really efficient with his targets. Obviously works well with Mahomes. He's a very skilled receiving back. But the reason why I like this number so much is because I don't need, number one, the efficiency to be that high. I just need him to catch a couple passes. But also, he came back from injury in week 7 and was quite good. Played even more in week 8. His routes run went from 10 in week 7 to 17 in week 8. He leapfrogged Kareem Hunt in routes last week after Hunt routed him by 5 in week 7. So I think there's like a not necessarily a changing of the guard here. Kareem Hunt is still going to be the running back 1. I just think they're realizing, you know what? Perine has a little bit more juice. He has a little bit more effectiveness in the passing game when we're in obvious pass down situations, or even some just like early down situations. Let's get Perine on the field as much as we can. And so I really like just like how much I expect him to be involved, and particularly just how many routes he's going to run. And we know that Mahomes likes to target these backs. So I think this is a really solid one. Tampa likes to blitz a lot. And so I think on the one hand, that means he will have to stay into pass protected times, but it also means that there are going to be times where when he releases, there's just nobody around him. And obviously Mahomes is as good as anybody at avoiding some of that early pressure and then finding the guy. So Pirine can be in blocking, then release after Mahomes makes a few guys miss and then gets that easy reception. So I think 7.5 is just way too low. Personally, I think this is probably something like a 65 to 70% likely to hit play.
Yeah, that all sounds like good logic to me there. And for my own personal, just anecdotal portion of the show here, I was a guy who in some of my deeper season-long leagues was taking a flyer on Samaje Perine, especially after Pacheco went down in these PPR leagues, and he just has not come through for me. So to maybe be able to make good for me here to close out week 9, putting him into our underdog entry here, I like that pick.
Yeah, and it's not like we're asking him to, give us 10 fantasy points or anything like
right.
that. Just 8 receiving yards. That's all I need. Right. All right. Do you have another NBA pick for us?
Yeah. I'm going. I like this game a lot. I think from the prop standpoint, and I think we can get we should have some interest on the DFS side as well, which we can talk about a little bit later in the stream. But Memphis at Brooklyn here tonight. Brooklyn already, of course, pulled off a couple wins that we probably did not expect to see here in the first 2 weeks of the season. But the Grizzlies 5-point road favorites here, solid 225 implied total. So I don't have too many concerns about this game getting so far out of hand that these guys I'm interested in both guys you have on the screen right there from this game, kind of topping the list over there on underdog. Of course, on the Memphis side, right, you're going to still be without Desmond Bane. You're still going to be without Marcus Smart. John Conchar is doubtful. Of course, G.G. Jackson, Vince Williams still out. And we saw Coach Taylor Jenkins come out kind of right before the season and say, or maybe even after the first game, where their minutes were just so flat for Memphis. They had 6 games in the first 9 days of the season. I think we are going to see the minutes start to trend up for the main guys, in particular John Morant. He did get over 30 minutes last game, I believe, for the first time this season, up to about 31 in the previous game. This is a guy who last season, again, only played the 9 games, right? But 25 points a game in his 35 minutes. So I don't think we should project him for 35 minutes tonight, but you look at the season prior, right? When he was an all-star, he started 59 games, played 32 minutes a game, 26.2 points per game in a matchup against a Brooklyn team that, again, is over the long term going to end up as one of the bottom 5 teams in the league. And they're trying to do that, right? I think John Morant, with all the absences that we have here tonight, even if he's held to about 30 or 31 minutes once again, I think this projection, or this line rather, is too low. And I guess I could also say, I think our projection is too low because that leans towards a slight under. I just think the usage is going to be pretty significant here, low to mid 30s for John Morant. He has been pretty efficient, especially in some of these single game sample sizes we've seen, right? Almost dropped the massive. I think he might have even gotten to the triple-double a couple games back. Yeah, 26, 14 assists, 10 rebounds in just 29 minutes in that blowout victory over Milwaukee. So going up against Brooklyn here, who also beat Milwaukee themselves last week, it's not that hard to do right now. They're sitting in last in the Eastern Conference, but I'm a big fan of John Morant, higher than 21.5 points tonight against the Nets.
Yeah, I like it. Brooklyn's also in below average in opponent points in the paint allowed per game so far this season. No surprise there. So that kind of fits just Jaw's attacking style offensively. So I like that. You mentioned you have an interest in Cam Thomas too. Do you want to turn this into a game stack and add anything from him?
Yeah, and I think, again, just the 5-point spread here. So if this game does stay within single digits and you get full run out of some of these Brooklyn guys, I think there's a case to be made to take a look at Dennis Schroeder in terms of his assist, where that rate goes with a guy like Ben Simmons off the court. Simmons not going to be active tonight here for Brooklyn. But it also does wonders for Cam Thomas and his usage rate, which, again, that's going to be high pretty much no matter who you put around him, because if Cam Thomas touches the ball, as you told me before we went to hit record here, if he touches the ball, it's going up. But small sample size to start the season, right? 111 minutes of Cam Thomas with no Simmons on the floor, 40% usage rate. And we know, again, if this game stays close and you're getting into the 30s in minutes for Cam Thomas, I also like the higher than selection on 25.5 points. And I think that is some decent correlation there if you expect this game to stay close.
It is. In fact, the pick'em tool that we have is showing that the over on Ja, not our favorite, but as you mentioned, like sometimes we want to bet against that. And actually, I think part of that is as we kind of rerun the games and run through projections, the projection might come up anyway. But the tool's already telling us that this is really well correlated, that when Cam Thomas is going over, Ja's chance of going over goes way up. When Ja goes over, Cam Thomas's chance of going over goes way up. So lots of correlation being shown here in the tool for us. So we almost don't even need to be more confident in Morant than what than what our projections are currently saying for this pairing to still be good. So I like this. We've got 4 now. I'm going to take us instead of going back to NFL. There is another NFL pick that I absolutely love, but I might save that. We'll see. I might save it for the 5:30 show with Prop God, with Two Gun, partially because I'm a little bit worried that it's going to move. So making sure our NFL loyalists get that pick. I don't necessarily need to give it away too early. I might here on the show. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe if we get to a certain number of likes. So if you're watching, make sure you like the show, subscribe to the FTN YouTube channel. We might give that one away. In the meantime, I have a feeling that the emergence of, or not the emergence, but the insertion of Paul George into this Philadelphia lineup is going to be fantastic for Tyrese Maxey. There's no question that he has struggled a little bit efficiency-wise with the load that he has had to carry offensively. You put this second guy on the floor who can take a lot of that pressure away, can take some of the focus of a defense, just adding 3-point shooting onto the floor. It's going to open up some lanes for him. I still think he's going to play huge first quarter minutes, but perhaps more important than anything else, one of the things that Paul George has been truly elite at every single year of his NBA career is creating deflections, creating turnovers, allowing his team to get out into transition. That is where Tyrese Maxey shines. So I'm going right back to his first quarter points here, over 7.5 first quarter points for Tyrese Maxey. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense getting Paul George back in there. It's not necessarily that he's taking the ball out of Tyrese Maxey's hands, which will happen some, but again, it's the extra spacing, right? It's just taking some of that load off in terms of the defensive attention that can be paid solely to Maxey, right? You're not as worried about a Kelly Oubre, a Caleb Martin, and Eric Gordon at this stage of his career. And we know about Tyrese Maxey in first quarters, of course, going back multiple years, that we love to pick and choose our spots to attack Maxey like this. Going up against that Phoenix defense, which again, like I think is certainly improved from last year, but it's just kind of on the margin. So I like that pick as well.
Not only that, but their best defensive players come in off the bench.
Yes.
Right. That starting lineup is very attackable. Tyus Jones, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and then Yusuf Nurkic, not the best rim protector. So Maxey's not going to have a better lineup to attack than in those first 6 minutes of the game. And then he should still play most of the first quarter. But honestly, even if he was only playing 9 or 10, I would still like this over 7.5 number. So definitely one of my favorites of the day. All right, let's see if we can top this off. Make it a 6-pick play. If you don't have anything you love, I can take us to that other NFL pick, or you can just top us off with another NBA one here.
Yeah, one guy that I've kind of been circling around and have not actually put into an entry yet this morning, though, is Bub Carrington from the Wizards, right? We've got no Kyle Kuzma again here tonight, and they're taking on the Warriors, or I should say hosting the Warriors here, right? Like we will see the Wizards a lot this season. Double-digit dogs, even at home with the Warriors coming in. I believe Steph Curry went through shoot-around this morning. So if the Warriors are getting back Steph Curry, this line makes sense to me. But this is kind of a minutes play. Like, I'm a big fan of Bub Carrington, going back to our preseason best ball drafts. Like, he was one of my most popular 16th round, right, the last round picks. And he has been kind of catapulted into a much larger role, especially from a minutes standpoint this early in the season. Like, I was making those best ball picks with February, March, and April in mind. Not that we were going to get Bub Carrington starting here in early November. He was on pace to play right around 40 minutes last game, and he lost some time to the blowout. So I think they have all the incentive in the world to play Bub Carrington as much as possible. Clearly, they've been showing that. But as long as he's ready, and man, like even going back to the preseason, this kid is an NBA caliber player. I've been really impressed with his ability to play off the ball. So unfortunately, I'm not super dialed in yet on which one of these props I want to attack. Right now, I'm kind of leaning towards the 17.5 points plus assists. Again, in the model, this is something that would be a slight lean towards the under. And so maybe because of that, we try to attack just the assists by themselves with the 1.11x multiplier on him, right? Malcolm Brogdon's still out for this team. Of course, Kyle Kuzma being out. Jordan Poole is playing the point guard and Bub Carrington is the off guard at this point, but he spends plenty of time with the ball in his hands. So I do have a little bit of interest there. And I think also giving that 6.5, picking the higher there with that multiplier could get us right back into the range of a 25x with our 6th pick here, given we took the 0.94x on Klay Thompson. So I'm kind of in between that points and assists, kind of at the flat payout, or just saying that he's going to be diming a little bit tonight against this Golden State team and gets over on the 6.5 assist number.
He's at 7.8 potential assists so far this year, only second behind Jordan Poole's massive 14.2 potential assists on the season. I wonder where is Poole's assist number, because that's a huge number. Also 6.5, but it's 0.93x. So yeah, I don't think.
The other thing I would point out with Bub is that he hasn't been in this starting role every single game so far. He started the first 2, went to the bench, came back in the lineup. And we've seen those minutes skyrocket since Kyle Kuzma went out as this team continues to take on water a little bit on the injury report, right? 25, 25, and 21 minutes the first 3 games, 33 and 37. And again, like I said, was on pace for right around 40 against the Heat. Again, lost that game by 20, but that was the first time that he got over this number. So like I mentioned, it's kind of just a minutes play for me, but if there's one thing that Bub Carrington, again, I didn't watch a ton of him in college, not a huge college basketball guy, but watch him in summer league and preseason, and then in the early weeks here of the regular season, the guy can pass really, really well. He's big, he's young, he's, I think, just turned 19, I think, in the last couple months. And again, over this number last game, I'm just kind of relying on 36 to 40 minutes here out of Bub Carrington against the Warriors.
And it's not just the more minutes. In the last 2 games, he's also jumped to averaging 11 potential assists in those 2 games. So you're 100% right. Like I think part of it is at the beginning of the season, it's like he wasn't being asked to do as much. Now as he's showing what he can do, he's earning more ball handling duty. He's earning more playmaking duty because he's actually doing it quite well, right? And I think another thing to note there is the shooting on this team isn't the greatest. And for as much shit as we want to give Jordan Poole at times, he's actually a good shooter. So it makes sense that Jordan Poole is the guy who's going to struggle with the assist per potential assist ratio, because when he's the one passing it, he can't be the one shooting it. And sometimes he's kind of like the only guy who can efficiently get the ball in the basket on this team. So yeah, I think this is definitely a good one because of the 1.1x multiplier that we are getting. Definitely don't take those for granted. This would have been around like 23x for a 6 pick if we took something just with a flat number. And now we're getting up to 26.1x. So I like this as a 6 pick play. All right, what do you think? Should we try to build out a 3 pick play of these just what do they call pick and roll special of just the 20 plus points with some multipliers?
Yeah, that works for me. I also just wanted to note on the Bub Carrington play, right? It's not just more minutes, it's with Kyle Kuzma off the floor. 98-minute sample so far this year, but that assist rate goes up to 27.4 on the season through the 5 games to 20.6. So again, you're seeing a pretty significant jump in the assist percentage for Bub with Kuzma off.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that. All right, let me bring up the. I unfortunately I can't show you guys this on the screen here. We have to just use our phones for this. So worth noting, if you're on Underdog and you can't find what we're talking about with this like pick and roll special, you have to go to the mobile app. Good news, Klay Thompson has jumped to 2.58x. So I think we're probably in lockstep here. That's going to be the first one we want.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
What was our? Can we run just one more time for everybody? What was our 6 pick play that we
Yeah.
did there on underdog? Obviously we started with Clay, and
Mhm.
his more or higher than 13.5 points. Samaje Perine, over seven, higher than 7.5 receiving yards. Then we got into the Brooklyn and Memphis game. John
Mhm.
Morant, Cam Thomas higher than Tyrese Maxey, 7.5 first quarter points. And then we closed it out with Bub Carrington higher than 6.5 assists. Nice.
You got it. You got it. All right. Um, do we want to double down here on John Morant because he's at 0.87x, which is certainly not terrible. It's not the 2.5x by any stretch of the imagination, but like I think we already have a really big multiplier that we like. So let's I think try to just take advantage of the profit boost that we're getting along with it, and maybe just go for two guys that we think are good values, even if they are slightly less than 1x.
Yeah, and I think, right, you're looking at some of those guys that are projected the highest and therefore carrying the lowest multipliers that are like 0.61 or 0.62, I think, on like a Trae Young or a Devin Booker. So getting
Mhm.
what you said, 0.87 on John Morant, I
Yeah.
like that a lot, right? Getting not as low as some of those other guys projected at the high end.
It's weird to me that Jaren Jackson Jr. is also at just 0.87x. So I'm not sure why John Morant and Jaren Jackson are at the exact same number, but I think that
Yeah,
shows that there is some value on Ja.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's
Um,
get Klay Thompson in there. Now we need a third one. We need a third. And I think the best way to do this, we can still use the tool for this. I think what we want to do is we just go to the tool, we go to points, and we're looking for guys who we already have a recommendation on towards the over, and then just find guys who really stand out. So there are two who stand out to me in the tool. The first is Julius Randle. Like John Morant, we have him at 21.5. Or like John Morant, his actual line is 21.5. With Randall, we haven't projected for 24.5. And
yep.
so I can actually type in 19.5 as this alternate line and see that we have Randall at 74.6% for at least 20 points. What do you think of that?
I love it. And even if you think that projection is a little bit hot, I
Mm-hmm.
think you should also be considering the matchup here against the Hornets and the availability or lack thereof in their front court with no Nick Richards, Mark Williams
Right.
still out here. So you're going to see a lot of Grant Williams. You're going to see this team go smaller. And while I think, and I know our buddy Sam was already posting some picks overnight, taking unders on Rudy Gobert's rebounds. And I think you certainly can do that. But like the flip side of it, right, is maybe you don't see as much Gobert because
Mm-hmm.
Charlotte's going to go smaller. And we know Randall can
Yep.
be that small ball five. So it's a good matchup across the board. But I think, again, finding that guy who's what is another 0.87x there with
Yeah.
a great projection in the model this morning. And you have those three in there, Ja, Julius Randle, and Klay Thompson, looking like to me 10.81x for this three
Mm-hmm.
pick. Just need all those guys to get what, over 20 points, correct?
Actually, I think it's higher than that. It should be 11.85x, and then if you're using
Ooh,
the
let me
boost, it goes up.
refresh. I come on now.
Maybe you only have the 2.0 right now for Clay, but yeah, I think there is one other guy I want to bring up. Actually, final point on Randall.
Okay.
For anyone who watches every single stream that we do, you probably heard us last time talking about if there was a concern with his points, it was that he had been shooting, I think it was like 67% or might have even been 75% from three, something insane like that.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like that wasn't going to continue. He went 0 for 3 from 3 against San Antonio, still scored 21. So we did see like just not necessarily a move back towards just kind of dominating inside, but we saw that even when he's not making his threes, he's still going to be very involved offensively, and they might just try to get him a little bit more involved on the inside. So I loved seeing that. It makes me a whole lot more confident, not just in him, but also in our projection for him, because we've been projecting him like at this kind of number almost every single game. And each time I've looked at it like, man, this seems high. I don't know how to get it lower, but it seems high. Now I think it's probably fair. He's gone over 20 in every single game except the opener this season. So I definitely think this at 0.8x is another really strong one.
Yeah, I think I would be fine subbing that in, either adding it to this entry or
Mhm.
subbing it in for either Ja or Julius Randle. Now that I've closed out of the app, refreshed that initial 3 pick, 14.02x here. I think
There
with
you
that,
go.
the
There you
20%
go.
boost as well.
Yep. One other guy I want to bring up because in the tool, for the second straight time, we have a big under on James Harden and a big over on Ivica Zubats. And so we talked about this last time, how they can be really correlated because Harden is such a high assist guy, but their points are always going to be inversely correlated. If Harden's outside taking threes, that's not good for Zubats. If he's driving and making those passes on the interior, that can really work for Zubats. So we have Zubats projected at 19. Now, let me check what his multiplier is, but I have a feeling this is going to be a really strong multiplier and maybe something that we want to use to even boost this even further. So Harden's at 0.72x, Powell 0.93, Ivica Zubats 1.57x. Let me see. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just change this manually to 19.5 and see Zubats 45% to go 20 plus. That's a hell of a lot better than 1.5x in our model.
Yeah, it makes sense to me here. Just taking a look, I know we got the GPP scores here. Couple interesting things that I want to highlight. So I don't think I have any more props if you want to transition to a little DFS talk here tonight.
Yeah, before we do that, let's try and decide on these three. We know we're using Clay. Then we have Randall, Zubats, and John Morant. Do you have a preference of those? Choosing 2 out of 3 because we can only choose 2 of them to get this profit boost.
Right. For me, it would be the first 2 with Randall and Morant that we talked about. But I'll let you. I could enter that one. You could do a different one, so we could, kind of tag team it there. I'll leave it up to you.
I think that one's definitely the strongest, and as I mentioned, I like using a higher probability play for the profit boost because obviously you only get the boost if it hits, right? If you go 2 for 3, you don't get that profit boost. So I like that thought. The only argument that I would have is we already have Morant in that 6-pick play. I'm probably going to run Morant some other times. So I definitely don't hate the idea of just going with my 3 favorite values, which or the 2 favorite values in Zubats and Clay to really boost that payout, and then going to Randall instead of Ja. Honestly, I think the move, and you know what? I don't know for a fact that the profit boost can only be used once. If it can be used multiple times, what I'll do is I'll take these 4 and I'll run it 4 different times with the 3 different combinations, or the 4 different combinations of 3 players that we can do. So 1 Ja, Zubats, Clay, then 1 Randall, Zubats, Clay, then 1 Randall, Ja, Clay, and then Randall, Zubats, and Clay. So that might be the way to go. I have to actually look and see what the stipulations on that profit boost are, but that's how I'm going to do it if I can.
Yeah, if you can run that profit boost multiple times, then the round robin is definitely the way to go there with those 4 picks. Obviously, with the 15-game slate, right? If you're looking at a site like DraftKings, they're going to do some funky stuff in splitting up this slate. And I think our buddy Shazam in the chat this morning had the best ideas. Like, why did we just not split this up? 8 games that start at 7 Eastern, 7 games that start at 9 Eastern, and call it a day. No, DraftKings, main slate, 2 turbos, and a night slate. So, again, most of our content focus is going to be on that main slate because of the unique nature of this Monday nighter here in the NBA. We'll, of course, be in the chat dealing with the late slate. I'll be playing the late slate because I want to get a little bit of action there. Clippers and Spurs, I want to play Wemby when I can. But looking at this from the DraftKings main slate, we can touch on FanDuel as well. FanDuel still giving us the entire thing, which I could also see an argument the other way that just doing 15 games can be a little bit overwhelming. On DraftKings,
not only that, but it also forces them to compete with NFL, right? Like I think they also kind of chose the cutoff for. I think DraftKings chose the cutoff for which games are on the main slate based on which ones should have their news in by the time the NFL game starts.
Yeah, that makes some sense to me. And again, like I said in the chat earlier this morning, I'll give DraftKings a little bit of leeway here on a 15-game slate with Monday Night Football. But so talk again, with a slate like this comes a pretty lengthy injury report. So make sure you're combing through all of that. One of the pieces of news that we already have here this morning is that Jaylen Brown is going to remain out here for the Boston Celtics. Celtics get a matchup here tonight against the shorthanded Atlanta Hawks. So it's going to look pretty good here for the defending champions with no JB. We saw Al Horford start at the 4 with Luke Cornett at the 5 last time out. And if that happens again, Luke Cornett is going to be one of, if not the highest owned player on this slate. Because of that, he has the worst GPP score right now in the DraftKings table. This is one of those value pieces that I think I would go against the model in my MME build. Alex, a $3,900 Cornett. Like, I believe the start before last was the first time in over 2 years that Luke Cornett had started and scored less than like 28 DraftKings points. So at 3,900 in a matchup like this, I gotta pay some attention to Luke Cornett. Maybe I end up under the field, right? He's coming in right around 40% right now. So he's by no means a lock, but looks like a pretty fantastic piece of value. But you could say that, not the value part, but this entire Boston team looks pretty darn good, right? With Jaylen Brown out of there, you're going to get a significant usage rate increase for Jason Tatum. You're also going to be able to, of course, go to a Derek White, go to a Drew Holiday. I think you can even go to a Peyton Pritchard in this type of situation at 5,200, 29 minutes last time out against Charlotte. And you know, if you're getting anywhere near 30 minutes from Peyton Pritchard with a little bit of a shorthanded Celtics team, you again, like Cornett, you got to at least pay attention.
Yeah, we have Keita projected as one of the best values, even though we only have him playing 14 minutes. So we probably got to bring his rates down a little bit. But outside of him, you still have Derek White, Jason Tatum, Drew Holiday, all projecting near the very top of our value metric. I want to ask you about the GPP scores that we're seeing so far. But before I do, I also want to point out, talking about the Celtics, one thing we kind of glossed over, a prop that has been outstandingly successful so far for us this season has been Derek White over 3.5 first quarter points. I was expecting to see with no Jaylen Brown that it was going to be 4.5, 5.5. It's still 3.5. So should we just be going right back to the 3.5 on Derek White, knowing he's going to continue to chuck threes early in games?
Unless I can see something very quickly here in the most recent rotations for this Celtics team, I don't know why we wouldn't go back to that. Just 6 minutes in the first quarter last time out. But again, 8 points in that short 6 minute run to start the game. 32.1% usage. So again, it feels pretty strong to me. My only hesitation would be that we saw him come out 6 minutes in last time out, but I think that concern can probably be offset with the fact that Jaylen Brown is not playing.
Yeah, I mean, because Jaylen was also out that game. I want to see, that was a back-to-back, so I'm wondering if that is why the minutes were lower. He came out 6 minutes in the game prior, but then came back in with 2.5 minutes left. So I'm sort of thinking that the only 6 minutes in the first quarter last game was a product of it being a back-to-back. So I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
No, I think you're spot on there, because that's why we've been going to Derek White. He gets that first 6 minute rotation, but then he comes back and bridges the first and second quarter. And so the fact that we didn't get that last game again, that was what was kind of eyebrow raising there. But coming off the day of rest, right, or maybe even 2 days at this point, I like that a good bit. I think that's a good find by you.
Yeah, I think that might be one of my favorite picks of the day, actually. Leapfrogging some of the ones we discussed earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build out some more plays in addition to ones we posted, and I will post those in the Pick'em channel once I have them all. There are probably going to be quite a few, because as if you guys remember, I've got some NFL picks I like too. So I got to find all of the ways to mix and match these. There are going to be a handful of 3-pick plays, maybe even a handful of 6-pick plays as well. So this should be a very fun night for the Pick'em games. And honestly, it's also a great game or a great night for Pick 6. When I do Pick 6, I will pretty much exclusively do NFL when there's NFL, because I'm chasing those 100x and 400x payouts. So again, tune in at 5:30. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. But let's jump back to the DFS side of things. Cade Cunningham has been a GPP score kind of phenom all season, and he has delivered for the most part. So are you jumping right back to Cade Cunningham, only $8,400 here as the current top GPP score?
So Cade was somebody that last night building a placeholder, I was taking a second and I think even a third look at, because that price still is pretty modest. I think he's been a better real life player than fantasy assets. So this year, so far this year, like he had the game 52.5 against Boston. I believe that game went to overtime, 48 against Miami, 48 against the Pacers, but it's kind of trailed off a little bit over the last couple games, right? And some of the tough matchups in there, right? You take on the Knicks, you take on Boston, you take on Miami. But even against a team like Brooklyn, right, just 31 DK points, 7 turnovers. He's been turning it over 7, 5, 5, 7 with a 1 sandwiched in there. And so, again, I was on the fence about Cade coming into the day, but looking at the GPP score, putting him up here at the top, I think that is the little kick in the rear end I needed to play some Cade Cunningham tonight, because you look at the matchup against the Lakers. Obviously, the Lakers have looked pretty darn good coming out of the gates this year themselves. They're 7.5-point road favorites here in the Motor City, 227.5 implied total. If this game is going to stay close throughout the entire fourth quarter, Cade Cunningham is probably a big reason why. So I think I agree with the model here that he looks like a pretty great GPP play. I would like to see that ownership come down a little bit, right around 21% right now, even on an 8-game slate. To be the highest GPP score, I think that may fluctuate. Like his score may stay the same, but I think we may see some other guys jump up above him throughout the day. And I'll keep my eye on that ownership because, again, the GPP score is matching up with me thinking that this could be a sneaky tournament play. It definitely makes you feel good. Also, like you mentioned, because he's been such a standout in the tool so far. And for more than half of those games, he's been pretty good.
Yeah, I also think his line on Prize Picks for turnovers is only 3.5. So you could also kind of almost hedge your bet by taking the over 3.5, because I think one of the reasons why the tool is so high on him, or why the GPP scores are so high on him, is because we sort of expect some of those turnovers to become good usage, right? And so if 2.5 turnovers become an assist and a 3-pointer, that's going to really help his projection. So I think that's part of it, but then you can kind of hedge with the over 3.5 turnovers, because the 3.5, he has blown by that in almost every single game this season. So it's just worth noting. I think another way I like just kind of approaching NBA DFS is just looking at the highest smash rates and then trying to find the guys who are underowned. So we have Cade, Tatum, LeBron, Derek White. So whenever somebody who's a little bit on the cheaper side really stands out in the smash rates, I think that's a great reason to use them. So Derek White, 6,700 seems great. Then Giannis, Collins, who again, like another guy who we only have him projected for 25 minutes. So that fantasy point per minute might be too high. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's probably coming in a little bit hot. But again, John Collins is a guy who you should expect to be well over a fantasy point per minute, especially in this role off the bench, getting to see some of the opposing team's second units, right? Like last game, 21 minutes, 32.5 FanDuel points, right? So again, he's producing at this very efficient rate, but the 21 minutes is a little bit concerning. Even in that game against San Antonio, he got up to a season high in his minutes. It's 27. Right. And now that price has come up, that price is up over $1,000, I think, over the last week on DraftKings. He did pick up that forward center eligibility, which is nice. But I do think I would hesitate a little bit. You can see the field not getting there at all at that price. I think that's probably what ends up, it settles in the low single digits at the most. But again, you're 150 max in some of these tournaments tonight. I'm not Xing out John Collins.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think this comp didn't really work in his Atlanta days when he was playing alongside of Capella and with Trae Young. But now with Utah, I kind of view him as a very similar role and play on a nightly basis to the Bobby Portis role in Milwaukee. How do you feel about that comparison?
Yeah, I think that's probably a decent comp there. Like you are seeing him play both some small ball 5 right in there for Walker Kessler, and playing alongside him at times. I don't think he got in there after, actually looking at the rotations, he played some 4 next to Kessler in 3 of the 4 quarters. And again, only played 21 minutes. So you're seeing on a game-to-game basis here early in the season, it doesn't seem like Coach Will Hardy has fully ironed out his front court rotation. And again, I think that's contributing factors are the gruesome Taylor Hendricks injury. Lauri Markkanen's been out the last couple games. So maybe we see that kind of stabilize and we have a more concrete idea of a game-to-game projection from a minute standpoint for Collins, maybe this time next week.
And I don't know if you noticed, but while we've been live, we did get the news that Markkanen doubtful again tonight.
Yeah, I saw that he participated in parts of shoot around, which did not feel great for his availability. Right. So now the update to doubtful. So should expect to be without him. We talked about Bub Carrington in the prop segment of the Dime here today. But I think the Wizards overall, again, shorthanded, are going to look like some good pieces of tournament value. Carrington himself, again, thinking about the potential for 38 or 40 minutes at a sub 5K price tag. Again, he's not a great point per minute guy thus far, but you don't need him to be a point per minute producer at his price, given the minutes projection that we will have on him here later this afternoon. Keyshawn George, one of the other rookies there in Washington, sub 4K, probably gets another start in Kyle Kuzma's stead. But this, again, weird schedule tonight, right? Because it's not just the 15-game slate. It's that we have a lock every 15 minutes from 7 p.m. Eastern on for, 15 times that. So Keyshawn George, 3,900. We'll want to look for that starting lineup because we know that they've changed things around there. You've had J-Val starting next to Sarr. You've had Sarr starting at the 5. You've had Carrington in and out. So we want to keep an eye on that starting group. But I think Washington is a team that we could be rostering maybe heavily by the time we get to lock on DraftKings tonight. And then, of course, it's a different story a little bit on FanDuel with the 15 games. Like, some of those guys are going to look similarly, attractive on fan. Like a Luke Cornett, I think he's 4K. So if you're using your center spot on Luke Cornett, right, that's a choice and one that is sometimes tough to make when you've got Jokic up there and what feels like a guaranteed 60+. The chalk of all chalk, I think, on FanDuel today is going to be Russell Westbrook. He's just 5.4K. They're missing Jamal Murray again. And while he hasn't been the monster fantasy point per minute guy that we've known over the last decade plus in Russell Westbrook, he got 31 minutes last game. He's still producing well enough where, to me, that is chalk, even at the number he's at, that I think I'm probably just going to eat. Yeah, you sort that, check that out, 50%. And I think it could be even higher by the time we get to lock.
Yeah, definitely. And also worth noting, like, we only have him projected at 24 minutes, and he's still a positive value. So this GPP score would go up if we think he ends up playing more than 24 minutes. We could also end up boosting his rates. So at the moment, very bad GPP score, but it might not be by the time we get to lock. Yeah. All right, any closing thoughts here on the DFS side of things?
Yeah, DFS, I'm done. Rapid fire prize picks fantasy props here this morning. Terry Rozier. These are all more thans over there on prize picks. Terry Rozier, 27 against the Kings. De'Aaron Fox on the other side of that game. Tough matchup with Miami, but 39.5 feels a little bit light to me. And then going back to, we already talked about in the prop section, John Morant, fantasy score 41. Higher. And then Karl Anthony Towns going up against the Rockets, right? I respect the hell out of Udoka's defense that he's implemented there over the last year plus, but 40 for a fantasy score of Karl Anthony Towns, taking the over.
Yeah, I love those fantasy point picks. I wish those were on Underdog already because I think the Morant one especially, like, that's insanely low because I think the biggest threat right now to his points is that he just ends up with a 15 assist game, something like that. So love that call. All right, guys, we will see you at 5:30 Eastern for the NFL show. Catch you next time.